Hey, everybody, welcome to a special edition of the SCB Steelers Podcast presented by Deck Roofing Incorporated of South Florida. We are part of the Variety Sports Network. And as always, I am originating the show from the Bradshaw Bourbon Studio. I'm not into the Bradshaw Bourbon yet. It's still a little early in the day, but tonight's regular show, you can bet. I'm really thrilled to have Nick Farabaugh from SteelersNow join me today. The rest of the guys all have regular jobs, to which I'll be returning to mine in another week or two. But in any case, Nick is a beat writer for SteelersNow and is doing a fantastic job of covering the Steelers at training camp. And he'll be heading down to Florida tonight to cover the game tomorrow. Nick, it is awesome to have you on. How are you doing, man?
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. It's awesome to be on. Always love to talk ball, but specifically, getting invited and kind of, seeing the work and allowing to espouse it. I enjoy it, but hearing people enjoy my work is always it's always the rewarding thing. It's why we do it.
It is. It's we don't get many rewards. We usually just get yelled at, especially when we do our live shows. We just get people making fun of us, and that's totally fine. I'm kidding a little bit. So a couple weeks in now, man, and I assume you've been enjoying the heat and the humidity of St. Vincent College. And just what are your overall takes right now on what you've seen so far from the Steelers?
Yeah, man. It has been an interesting camp. Different than the other two I've covered from 21
Mm-hmm.
and 22 because those were far different vibes, right? This one is an ascending team with a young quarterback that made a bunch of additions. So it's been really acclimating yourselves to all the new guys. It feels
Yeah.
like this is the biggest overhaul I've seen on a Steelers roster in quite some time. There's just a lot of new guys, new corners, new safeties, new linebackers. There are some new D linemen. There's obviously an entirely new left side of the offensive line, like
Mm-hmm.
a new wide receiver. There's just so much to acclimate yourselves to. And so that's been the vibe. It's been trying to figure out who they are. And what you can kind of feel is this is a team that is different from last year's and the year before. This is a team that feels like a young team that's hungry, but they're going to
Mm-hmm.
go through mistakes. But they have enough veterans too to where they have kind of this floor. I'm not sure this is a team that has a particularly high ceiling, but I think it's a team that certainly has a floor of where they kind of understand. I think they're starting to understand, Kenny
Mm-hmm.
Pickett in year two and Mike Tomlin instilling this culture on a new generation of players and bringing guys like Patrick Peterson, Allen Robinson, Isaac Sayamalo. They're starting to build their own little culture here for kind of this next wave of football, right? Killer
Yeah.
Bees era is fully gone now. That is no longer here. So it's time to turn over a new leaf. And I think you're starting to see a new culture kind of be put in. And so you're seeing Mike Tomlin really start to push those pieces in and say,
Mm-hmm.
all right, I built this out now with some young guys starting all the way back in 2019 when you had guys that are leaders now on this team like Deontay Johnson. There's still holdovers from that Killers B era like a Cam Hayward and a
Yeah.
TJ Watt. But you also have this new veteran presence where you have Patrick Peterson and Allen Robinson, and then you have the head figure,
Mm-hmm.
Mike Tomlin. It's an intense feeling. These guys are going after it. I think there's an optimism around that team right now, though, that this could be a year where they finally kind of crack through it, and this could be their year where they make the playoffs, and this could be the start of a run here in the 2020s to where this team can maybe be a contender that you look at and say that's a playoff team every year.
Have you picked up on any sort of differences in Mike Tomlin and just his overall mannerisms and stuff from the last couple of years?
I think he is embracing a new challenge for the first
Yeah.
time in his career, the first time he's ever had a young quarterback to work with. So it's been different. He's
Hmm.
had to rely on leaders not named Ben Roethlisberger. So you don't have the quarterback to lay down the culture. He is the culture,
Hmm.
Mike Tomlin. He has been the main leader. He's been going through kind of training these young guys. Right, Najee Harris was a personal project of his
Hmm.
to become a leader. That's happened. Deontay Johnson has quietly become a leader. Like all these guys that he has started to kind of be very hands-ons with. I think Mike Tomlin, I don't know if his mannerisms have been any different. I think he is very intense right now. I think
Right.
that's he's bringing an energy where I thought he was a little bit more laid back last year with the young quarterbacks and the quarterback competition. I think he was just trying to kind of sit back, let things move out, go on a more individual basis. Now it's like it's full throttle time. Like it's time. We had two.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, what Mike Tomlin would say is we had 2 9-8 seasons. It's time now to break through that ceiling, and it's time to win some playoff games.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the vibe is right now. You can tell there's an expectation from Mike Tomlin that this team is going to do more. Kenny Pickett's in his second year.
Right.
So, yeah, I think the mannerism changes is you hear him chirping a lot more at the defense when they say blow up a run, right?
Yeah.
It's a good thing. Or the offensive line. Like yesterday, he said 2 things that stood out to me when TJ Watt was destroying run plays. Can somebody block TJ, please? That's not a praising TJ quote. Everyone knows TJ's good. It's to the offensive line. Get together.
Yeah.
I remember also Darnell Washington has caught like 8 touchdowns at training camp thus far in team periods. Caught another one yesterday, and he goes to Darnell, and Darnell Washington is not a big talker. He kind of just, he's a catch the ball for a touchdown, hand the ball to the ref guy.
Right.
But Mike Tomlin's there sitting on the back of the goalpost, shouting between 3 DBs that he just beat, saying, "Talk to them, Darnell, talk to them." And people took that as, oh, Mike Tomlin wants Darnell to trash talk. No, that's Mike Tomlin getting on his defense, telling them to shape it up. That's him getting on his secondary. And so I can see him doing that more and more, and I can see him pushing this team more and more. So I think there's he embraced the challenges last year in a different manner. Now I think he's back into, all right, go time. We're playoffs, right?
Yeah.
Super Bowl. I think last year, even Mike Tomlin had to admit the Super Bowl wasn't happening last year, but now you have a second-year quarterback. You brought in veterans. You brought in all these guys. It's go time. It's go time. That's what Mike Tomlin would tell you.
It's always interesting to hear the national media because, and this, you get those national beat guys that come into camp for a day, they do all their interviews, and then they're gone. And, they do their write-up. And a lot of times with Tomlin, it's all, oh, he's still got the passion, and he's still got this, and he's still got that. It's the same every year from them. I mean, what you just said is exactly the reason I wanted you on the show, because you were able to see some distinct differences between maybe last year and this year already. And I think that's good. I mean, it tells me that Mike Tomlin isn't just collecting a paycheck. He's still hungry. He's still after it. He's got energy. And I mean, as just a fan, I mean, I love it. And I'm excited for it. Now, you also mentioned second year Kenny Pickett. What is his, I mean, obviously he didn't get a lot of time with the ones last year in camp, but what do you notice differently about him already this year?
He looks like a second-year quarterback now. Like when he's going through training camp, it just looks easy for him. I think that was the first requisite.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like last year where he struggled out the gate and then progressively got better. Like he came in day one and looked polished. He looked like he had been through this before. He looked like he had been a quarterback that had played an NFL game.
Right.
That was a good thing. He looks like a starting NFL quarterback. I think that's the biggest thing. Like he doesn't look like a backup to me. He looks like a guy that is getting better with his progressions. He's starting to kind of feel the pocket a little bit more, although I don't know how much that pocket presence is truly because of practice or, it's hard to recreate a live pocket without being hit if you're
absolutely.
A quarterback. So let's see how that goes in games. I kind of want to reserve that, but I think his processing has been better. I think he's been able to go through reads a little bit better. I think the game's just slower for him, and you can kind of see it. Hasn't really made a ton of errant decisions. He's had a few interceptions. I think he had like 2 or 3. One of them wasn't on him.
Yeah.
The other one was. But I mean, he is a guy that right now feels like a quarterback that's kind of in that middle tier of the NFL. I largely like, he doesn't look like a star. He doesn't look like a Joe Burrow, a Justin Herbert, a Josh Allen, and he doesn't have the arm talent of those guys either.
Nope.
But he does. I think he can get himself, say, to a level where we're talking about him in the tier of Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo. That's for this year. And then maybe next year we could start talking about him maybe up the next tier where he goes to Kirk Cousins' level. I think that's kind of where you look at him and say that's where he can be. Maybe, his ceiling is somewhere around, a Dak Prescott level quarterback, which seems about right to me. He does have some Joe Burrow. I saw Daniel Jeremiah say that he has some Burrow traits. I think he does. have some Burrow traits. Obviously, Joe Burrow is a better quarterback, and he's not got the full Burrow package, mainly because Joe Burrow just is a wizard in the pocket. And I think
Yeah.
that's really how the difference there. And, I think Kenny actually might have a better arm than Joe Burrow. Like, I don't think Joe Burrow's arm talent has ever been like the sticking point, but he's just so precisely accurate and so
Yeah,
great in the pocket.
absolutely.
And like Kenny Pickett is pretty accurate.
Mhm.
And I think that's been a good thing too. He's been more accurate deep. I think that's been a good thing. And he just kind of seems more willing to throw the ball down the field this year because I think he's not thinking as much. And I think that's a good thing for him. So I think that's the difference. I think they've built an offense around him that is supposed to support him and rather than him having to support them. And what I mean
Mhm.
by that is we're not talking about a guy that you win games because of yet. That's not what he is. He's not an elevator of
It's a good
talent.
way to put it.
He
Yeah.
is a supporter of talent. And so he needs that right now. And so you need a strong running game. You need a good O line. You need nice weapons. And he's certainly got the weapons around him. I think
Yeah.
obviously there are a few questions on this offense still, but I think he's looked like a good quarterback. And I think he's looked like a guy that looks like a starter. So I think that's good. I think they're going to have a good floor with him. I don't think the ceiling's
Mhm.
super high with him yet. But are we talking about a Kenny Pickett that could push himself into that top 20 conversation with, the Jimmy Garoppolo of the world? Absolutely. And I think if that's where he ends up being this year, they don't really need him to be so much more than that yet. I think next year is going to be the real year where we see, okay,
Right.
where's this guy going to crack through? But I think this year it's more about, all right, can he get on par with
Mhm.
those guys, right? With a young quarterback, just keep that upward trajectory going and get into that tier of Jimmy Garoppolo, Derek Carr's, Ryan Tannehill's. I think that's where he can sit this year.
If it I totally get what you're saying. Our comp on Pickett since day one of him being drafted has basically been like he's going to be in that Derek Carr range right now. You know, what do you tell Steelers fans who when they hear the discussion we're having and they're kind of like, well, that's not good enough. You know, we need upper echelon type guy. We need the Josh Allens, the Patrick Mahomes. What do you say to fans because they have to understand the realistic stuff here, don't they?
Yeah, you have to understand when they drafted him for a specific reason.
Hmm.
It necessarily wasn't because of his arm talent. They certainly didn't draft him because of his
Yeah.
arm talent. He's always had average arm talent. Now he can
Hmm.
run. He's got good athleticism, very underrated.
Yep.
He
Yep.
throws off platform, right? He's a very modern type of that quarterback. And when we talk about a Derek Carr or a Ryan Tannehill, a Jimmy
Hmm.
Garoppolo, whatever, Teddy Bridgewater before his injury,
Mm.
these are comps that were thrown out,
Yep.
for Kenny Pickett when he was coming out. We're
Yep.
talking about guys that often are pocket presence, guys that can run. Kenny Pickett's different in the way that he goes outside the pocket and makes throws on the run. And that's why he was so Derek Carrish, because Carr does that, right?
Hmm.
And
Definitely.
so he was different because he has the ability to at times be an elevator of talent. He's not a consistent elevator, but because he
Hmm.
can do things outside of the pocket that a lot of quarterbacks cannot do, he is an elevator at times. So you have to understand what you get with a guy like that. You will get kind of this weird tidal wave of emotions with that guy. And what
Yeah.
I mean by that is
Yeah.
he
Oh
might
yeah.
play very mediocrely through three quarters. And then you see games like that Ravens game where he
Yeah.
turns it on and he can
Yeah.
make things happen. That's what he can do. And Kenny Pickett was drafted for his intangibles. 100%. We're talking about
Yeah.
a guy that has a winner's mentality, a guy that gets a locker room behind him. The issue that all those guys run into, all those guys in
Hmm.
that middle tier, right, that we talk about when they end up getting moved off of, the biggest issue that they always run into is that locker room doesn't ride for them anymore because they're like,
Mm.
this guy isn't it. He's not taking us to the promised land. I don't think that happens with Kenny Pickett. Now, the development curve he has to take has to be like this, or otherwise it can happen
Oh
sometimes
yeah.
because listen, he could easily become a Baker Mayfield if they mismanage him, and that's
Hmm.
not what you want. What you want him to be is statically in that tier for this year.
Yep.
So you can take him to the next level of being a Kirk Cousins because why? A Kirk Cousins might be the 12th best quarterback in the NFL.
Hmm.
But trust me when I say this, Kirk Cousins can be an elevator of talent. That's true.
Yeah.
Kirk Cousins is he might be a franchise quarterback for some, might not be for others. But no doubt about it, he's a good NFL quarterback. And that's really what you need Kenny Pickett to be. He's never necessarily going to be this top level quarterback, but if he gets the in-structure stuff, kind of the stable stuff down, I'm telling you, he could be a top 12 quarterback if everything goes well. He's got that winner's mentality. The intangibles are elite.
Yeah.
I 100% tell people this. I've covered him at Pitt too.
Right.
I've seen Kenny Pickett for, at this point, 6 years through his college career and now to the NFL. The guy's a winner. The guy has a magnetism to him that teams just draw to. And one of the comps that I think doesn't get thrown out enough for him that I think makes a lot of sense is Alex Smith. I like that comp a lot. I think it's a good comp because Alex Smith was a guy when he was a veteran, was a great locker room leader, a guy that took teams to the playoffs, was wildly successful with Andy Reid. Remember before Patrick Mahomes came into the Chiefs were still perennially either in the division round, the championship game, whatever it might be. They were in the playoffs basically every year. So that's a guy that I could see him being like. So it's hard to tell a fan, say, you might not have the next superstar quarterback. You might not have the next Justin Herbert. And especially it's tougher when the quarterbacks in your division are Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. That's the real tough part of it.
That's a great point.
Like, I think it's tough. And then obviously Deshaun Watson was a superstar, and we don't know what he's going to be this year.
Right.
So if he returns to superstar status, then it's even tougher. But I think Kenny Pickett gives this team a very easy quarterback development curve. He's a hard worker. He wants to get better. The team loves him, and his support system around him is strong as a result of that. So everyone wants to help the guy. So it's hard not to think he should have this curve. You just have to make sure the coaching staff around him and kind of the things he is doing are the right things. And so your biggest issue, if you think he could become another Baker Mayfield type, is what about Matt Canada? Is he helping his development or is he hurting it? Mike Tomlin specifically, am I hands-on enough as the head coach to make sure this quarterback is getting to where he needs to go? He's the most important player on this football team right now, period. He needs to become that next level of player because if he turns into Kirk Cousins, if he turns into that level of player, if he turns into who that could be, which is what Alex Smith was during his time with the Chiefs before his leg injury. Are we talking about a guy that you could win with? And history says you can as long as you have the right pieces around him. Now, those guys that have been in that echelon that have made it to a Super Bowl have been surrounded by innovative offensive coordinators. Jimmy Garoppolo, Kyle Shanahan, Jared Goff. He is obviously with Sean McVay. So that's kind of going to be a thing that we're going to have to talk about. We're going to have a big conversation about what that offensive coordinator is going to have to be in order to get Kenny Pickett there. But if Kenny Pickett continues to develop, I still think his ceiling is very similar to that of Dak Prescott, who I think is a tier above Kirk Cousins. So could be, if he ends up being a Dak Prescott-like player, and remember Dak before he had that serious lower leg injury, run a lot and go outside the pocket. We could see a Kenny Pickett kind of like that, where he stays in the pocket but goes outside and plays quite well. And, listen, you can complain about Dak's affinity to not winning big games, whatever, but the guy puts up good numbers and he gets wins for his team, and Dallas is pretty consistently in the playoffs.
And exactly. Get me in the tournament. And from there, who knows? I mean, we've been on this planet long enough to know that crazy things happen when you get in those one and done situations. Just get me in there behind a guy, like you said, that's got his teammates' support. Everybody's behind him, and I'll roll the dice from there. How have you liked what you've seen from the offensive line, which obviously pretty revamped in a lot of ways? What do you like from that?
Yeah, I think the O-line's interesting. It's tough to tell without live reps because they really only have one tackling period. But I'll say this. I think their interior is very solid. I like that part of it. Isaac Seumalo is the anchor of this group. He is just the perfect guy to put in there as the leader. There is not a personality here that is a Marquise Pouncey, a guy that is like boisterous and talks trash and everything. These guys are all laid back, but when they get on the football field, they'll kick your teeth in. and I think that's a good way to put it. That's Isaac Seumalo.
Yeah.
He's so even keeled. He will put people on his back and just go like nothing happened. Like he's a great leader. He's a great teacher, I think, too. I think, he's a guy that really embraces young guys, and he's certainly embraced Broderick Jones very well.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a camaraderie among this group that is good. So I think that's the first step. I do think we are talking about a group that is still a year away from really hitting their stride as a good offensive line. And I say that because, one, I think they have a really solid guard duo in James Daniels and Isaac Seumalo. Those
Totally
are two top
agree.
15
Yep.
guards at their respective positions. So that's good. You have that. But Isaac Seumalo probably shouldn't be your best offensive line. And I say that because he's probably like the 12th best left guard in the NFL, which is good. It's good to have, obviously, good linemen, right? But do you want that guy being your best lineman, or do you want an elite center? Do you want an elite tackle, right? Because they really have – this is the makings of a group that is a pretty good run-blocking group, probably above average, and will probably be slightly below average in pass pro. Like, that's what it has to me. Chuks Okorafor is a good pass protector, not a great run blocker, but he's kind of where he is right now. Like, you kind of know what Chuks is, right? Yeah. Like, solid tackle. Not kind of unspectacular.
It's exactly how I would have defined him, is what he is.
Mason Cole's very similar. I think, solid but unspectacular at center. If you go up against elite nose tackles, that can be a trouble. Yeah. And Mason Cole played better than I thought he would last year. But he could be a guy that I think you could look to upgrade next year on. So I think, I think they did it at left tackle. I'm not sure how ready Broderick Jones is going to be either.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean he'll not start week 1, but look at the history of rookie tackles in the NFL, man. They just don't usually play well. There are outliers to that. You look at a Rashawn Slater who came in and was one of the best tackles right away. But, that when we talk about that, like that's a skewer, right? That's a guy that kind of skews the data set.
For sure.
We talked about that a lot with quarterbacks too, when a Justin Herbert comes in and suddenly plays like he's the 10th best quarterback in the NFL, or Mahomes comes in year 2 and looks like the best quarterback in the NFL. Like that's not the usual. These guys are aliens and different. But Broderick Jones could be a Andrew Thomas type of tackle. Where he struggled week 1, he struggled week 2, he struggled his whole first year. That's what Andrew Thomas did. And now Andrew Thomas got a massive contract because he's one of the best tackles in the NFL. I think that's a Broderick Jones path that could happen. He's a plus run blocker right away. There's no doubt about it. He's ready as a run blocker. He's a better run blocker than Dan Moore is right now, like 100%. Is he a better pass protector than Dan Moore? Probably not. And so that's the consideration you're going to have to take. And tackle's such an experience-based position. I honestly lean towards playing the young left tackle. I'm just going to say this. I've told people this many times. Don't get mad if Broderick Jones is not perfect year 1. He's not going to be. He's a rookie tackle. And if he is really good and stuns everybody, folks, you got yourself a top tackle. And so I just don't understand how there isn't a benefit from playing Broderick Jones very early on. Maybe you ease him into it, and maybe you don't play him till after the bye because that first stretch of edge rushers is quite brutal.
It's a gauntlet.
And so maybe you get Dan Moore out there and kind of, say, all right, we'll let this kind of simmer, and then out of the bye week, Broderick Jones is in, but he'll start at some point this year. I'm just not sure he's going to be this savior of the offensive line that everyone makes him out to be. It's not like this team's going to go from where they were at the end of last year to an elite offensive line.
Well, I totally agree with you. Limit those expectations.
Average. Yeah, they were below average last year. With a good run blocking unit. And they were a great run blocking team last year at the second half. I mean, they were top 10 in basically every metric you can put out there, rushing efficiency at the kind of back half of last year. But just don't expect the team to maybe take a huge leap offensive line-wise there. They'll get better because Seumalo's there. They will be better. But I'm not going to say right now this team is suddenly going to be like an elite offensive line. They'll be a top half of the league. 15th, 16th, 14th. Somewhere 14 through 17. That sounds about right to me.
I wouldn't hate that. As long as there's pretty consistent improvement. I mean, I wouldn't hate that. Let me ask you real quick before we talk a little defense. Who's been like your best interview so far in camp?
Man, best interview so far. That's a good question because
Yeah,
there are some interviewers, that I like a lot. I'll say this: Deontay Johnson's been a good one.
awesome.
He's a quiet dude, but man, he's insightful. Gunner is a quote and a half. I love Gunner. He's a guy that he got out of New England and loved it. Like you can
Right,
tell, he's like,
right.
all right, I'm here now. I'm gonna give it all to you. I think my best interview though, and the guy that I love the most, just talking ball to,
Hmm.
is Braden Fehoko, and that's an interesting one because he's the big nose tackle. But
Yeah.
like, I can talk to that guy about the art of double teams and what the nose tackle means to the modern NFL, and I love talking to that guy. There's a lot of good interviews on the scene. Patrick Peterson might be one of my,
That's
Fehoko. If I'm
great.
just talking ball,
Yeah.
is the guy I like the most. But if I'm talking like NFL life and kind of the happenings without a locker room, it's Patrick Peterson.
He seems to me, based on what I've seen and heard and read, he seems to me to be a guy that's going to have a future in front of a camera, probably.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
He's already got a podcast with
Right.
Ryan McFadden, and
Right.
he should be an analyst. Absolutely. Like that makes a lot of sense to me for Patrick Peterson to be on whatever ESPN, NFL Network,
Yeah.
wherever you want it to be. He is an insightful guy. We are talking about a guy that just gets football. Like, and
Hmm.
he just like has more wisdom that he's learned through the game of football that applies to life. Like he is just a guy. If you are like a young player, I would just latch myself to Patrick Peterson. Like
No doubt about it.
100%. Joey Porter Jr. has been basically stalking him all camp. So I think he agrees.
Well, and I think that's exactly what Mike Tomlin probably had in mind. When they drafted JPJ, they're like, yeah, okay, got Pete over here. You follow him. And that nothing bad can come of that. Inside linebackers, that's one of my main concerns right now. Just do they have the ability to cover the backs, the tight ends? And obviously in run defense, a lot of it is what those guys in front of you do. Do they keep you clean, allow you to make tackles and everything? But what have you seen from that group? I mean, does this feel like a group that's elevated itself from what we've seen the last couple of years, or you still got some concerns?
Yeah, I think that this group was one of my main concerns. And then they signed Quan Alexander. And
Mm,
that has changed a lot of what they can do in this room. I'm not sure it's any, it's not like this is going to be an elite inside linebacker group. But here's what I'll say.
mhm.
They have, for the first time, I think, in a while, a consistent guy they can rely upon, and that's Cole Holcomb. I think he is a guy that you just know what he is. Good leader,
Yep.
good run stuffer, pretty solid in coverage. Like he'd be the best coverage linebacker they had last year by
Mhm.
far.
Yeah.
So like you get this floor with him, which is solid starter, which they haven't really had since Vince Williams retired, to be quite honest with you.
Amazing.
Like it's been a while since we can even say they've had like solid starter level
Yeah.
play. Miles Jack at the start of last year was that. Then he hurt his groin and kind of fell off a cliff.
Yeah. Big time.
Like that. So it's kind of tough. But Cole Holcomb looks solid. Like he looks better than I thought he would. But then you go back and watch the Washington tape, and it sticks there. He's a
Mhm.
solid player. Landon Roberts is like the hammer. Just that's what he is. Like he doesn't cover anybody. He just comes downhill and kills tackles, guards, running backs, whatever it might be. You can always use a guy. He's a real throwback, and he's a really good leader. He's a good intangibles guy. Like for Mark Robinson, that's a great example to follow. To have a Landon Roberts there. Then you have Mark Robinson, who is basically more athletic than Landon Roberts. And what I mean by
Okay.
that is he is your hammer that has coverage upside. And obviously he's still young. He's a
Mhm.
former running back,
Mhm.
basically in his third year of playing linebacker. So we'll see. But Quan Alexander changes my view of this room because he's the veteran that might not be what he was when he was at his peak, but he is the guy that is still solid to bring you coverage upside. He's your best
Mhm.
coverage linebacker to where you can now specialize this room. And what I mean by that is Rundowns, it's Holcomb and Roberts.
Yep.
Passing downs, it can be Holcomb and Alexander. It can just be Alexander. In dime, Keanu Neal is there now, right? Like you can make him the dime linebacker. So you have this specialization. And I think the Steelers, we have seen them. People think that the Steelers get stuck in their ways a lot, but I think they evolve a lot. For example, look at their drafting strategy after the bust of Jarvis Jones. They draft athletes now, just athletes, right? Yeah. Athletes on athletes on athletes. They learned from that Jarvis Jones pick. I think we are starting to see the ramifications of the Devin Bush miss. And by that, I mean, this is now a committee position that this team is not going to invest a ton into. They're not going to invest a massive contract into someone. They're not going to go up into the top 10 and draft an inside linebacker anymore. They think that this could be a group where if they get guys like Holcomb, a Quan Alexander, and a Landon Roberts that can stick there, those will be your guy. You don't need to have this massive en masse investment into this position. And teams continually prove that. The best linebacker in the league is Fred Warner, and he was not drafted in the first round, at all. And so teams consistently prove that. And you look at where this team is going. They are specializing their defense more by sub packages and base. And now they're very matchup based. And so if they face the Ravens, for example, and we'll see what the Ravens offense looks like, but let's say it's the classic Ravens offense where Lamar's running, J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards. Landon Roberts is going to play that whole game, right?
Yeah.
You can match him up. But if you face a team, for example, like the Bengals that spread you out, you need your coverage guys, Quan Alexander. I think that's what you can do. And so it allows you to be more matchup based. I think it's going to be a good group. This room has been really good since Quan came in. Like they played really well in camp. They look solid. I don't think they're going to be like some elite unit. I said that before, but I think they can be a fine unit to where it's like you're not losing games because of them. They can help you out. And I think the biggest thing is going to be, can they create turnovers with that room? I think they've been missing production from the middle.
For sure.
But we'll see. But I do know this. I just don't think it's going to be some eyesore. I thought it was going to be a really big issue, and I think it would have been a really big issue if Quan Alexander wasn't there. But I think now that he's there, they're very versatile and can let the guys do what they do well. Like, you don't have Robert Spillane as the dime linebacker last year in coverage where his strengths are not accentuated. True. I think Landon Roberts' strengths will be accentuated. So will Quan Alexander's, and then you have the all-around guy in Cole.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating because, the modern NFL, you have to spend your money diligently and wisely in certain areas of your team. And the middle linebacker is a place that not every team is really willing to spend money anymore. Because like you said, you can find guys in the draft or free agency that can fit roles, and you got so much specialization now. This isn't your father's 70s where, 11 guys were pretty much on the field all three downs all the time. It's just not that way. So I think that's a great point. Nick, before I get you out of here, just what does a successful 2023 look like for the Pittsburgh Steelers this year?
The biggest thing, and I keep saying this, is Kenny Pickett takes the step. That's the success, man. This team needs to be on an up arrow. This is a young team with ascending young players. When you have a quarterback in year 2, you have a very good receiver heading into year 2. Freiermuth in year 3. Harris in year 3. Warren in year 2, right? You have young guys. You have a rookie tackle. You should be better on offense. I need to see the ascent on offense. For defense, the same old, same old. You need to have good play out of that defense. But the biggest success story that can ever come out of this season is Kenny Pickett proving that he can be a long-term option quarterback. Yeah. That is the biggest thing. Quarterback anxiety in the NFL is the worst thing you could be in, period. You want that quarterback. You need that quarterback. It dictates what you do as a franchise around every other position. Clearly, they are planning to have Kenny Pickett be the quarterback of the future. But if he proves he is not, they are back to square one. Next year should be the year, theoretically, where this team starts to really clash it out with the Titans, right? 24 is that year for this team. They have built it up. They have drafted. This should be the year where everything comes together. You have the defense with its superstars, and you have the offense with its ascending young guys. This year, they might be a year away from that, and I think they are still a year.
Yeah.
But what's a successful season? 10-7, make the playoffs. Maybe you nab a win in the playoffs. You're the New York Giants from last year, but with more upside because Daniel Jones is the young quarterback instead, right? You have a young quarterback that can get better. So I think a season like that, a 10-7 season where you make the playoffs, maybe you snake one away from a team, make it to the divisional round, good, because that should signal to you Kenny Pickett is the guy, and you got more there. And so that's a successful season where the team just gets better offensively. They don't regress in any significant areas, and they find out Kenny Pickett can be a guy long-term.
I agree with you. I think that's where it's got to be. Man, I don't even want to think about a step back because you're right. Man, if you have to go back to square one with quarterbacks in this league, it just sets everything back, and I don't even want to think about that. So count me as a Kenny Pickett fan. I'm rooting hard for this guy. Yeah. I mean, he's obviously very likable and doing all the right things, as you said, but
it's just hard to find quarterbacks.
It is.
Really is. And I think people in the post Ben Roethlisberger area were very fearful of what happened between Bradshaw and him.
For sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
Do you want Bubby Bristers all the time? No. Do you want those guys? You had flashes in the pans during that period. You had Cordell and they made it to a Super Bowl with Neil O'Donnell, but did they ever find the long-term quarterback before he came along? They did not.
Let me ask you real quick. I'd be totally remiss if I didn't. What do you think's happening with Kendrick Green?
Oh, geez.
Are we going to see him at fullback, or is this just Tomlin being funny?
I think he's going to be a center fullback, and I think he's going to be your backup center and your fullback. I think it's real. I think it's real. I do. He's repped there every day since Friday, and Mike Tomlin hinted at it yesterday, but it sounds like he's going to play there tomorrow. I'm very excited to see him against the Buccaneers. I want to see him just destroy an edge rusher.
I do too, and here's the thing for me with him. A lot of people have just ragged on the poor kid, and I always look at it like it wasn't his fault he was drafted third round. It wasn't his fault he was thrust into being the starting center despite little experience at Illinois in that position. I want to see the kid succeed because he's shown that he's willing. He puts in the time, works his butt off, says all the right things. I want to see him succeed. And if his role is that of a fullback, H-back, whatever, and then so be it. I think it's great. I mean, I see video of the kid on the jugs machine. It's funny we're like 53 catching on the jugs machine, but I don't care. You use your talent the best way you know how, and Mike Tomlin knows a hell of a lot more than I do. So I'd love to see it. See it.
I think you're gonna see it too. And listen, specializing, versatility, it's the name of the game. We're not going towards positionless football, but we're going towards versatile football.
No.
That's on both sides of the football. It's certainly on the defensive side. Even on the offense, I mean, we don't really talk about it being center and fullback. That's not really a combination you see. But listen, the more hats you can wear, the better you are on a 53-man roster.
Absolutely. You better chances of you getting a hat. No doubt about it. Hey, Nick, thanks so much for jumping on with us. I really appreciate it. Have a safe flight down to Tampa tonight and enjoy that preseason game tomorrow night. Hopefully the food is good up in the press box. It's always one of the great things you hear from the writers and stuff, who has the better food and all that stuff. So enjoy it, man. We really appreciate you coming on. Have a great night Friday and a great season.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you having me on. It's always good to talk ball, and let's hope the Tampa food is good. Never been to Raymond James, so that'll be new.
Awesome, man. Enjoy it. Thanks so much.
All right, man. Thanks for having me on.
This has been the SCB Steelers Podcast presented by Deck Roofing Incorporated of South Florida.